Hello and welcome. Yo-Yo Ma is a classical musician who's broken the barrier of pop culture, a maestro who's captured a fan base of millions through his skills as a cellist. But there's much more to this performer than meets the ear. His extensive travels across the world have led him to create a project that unites cultures and traditions from east to west. The Silk Road Ensemble brings together musicians across the world to share a common experience through the medium of sound. Well, today, Yo-Yo Ma shares some of those experiences with us. Well, Yo-Yo Ma, it's a real honor to be talking with you.
Well, it's wonderful to be with you. I've admired you for years, and so
this is mutual admiration time. Thank
you.
Yeah,
thanks. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. No, I have to ask you to start off with, when I said I was interviewing you, and I told a lot of my friends, they said you have to ask him about his performance in 2001 with the US Secretary of State, Condoleezza Rice, at the National Medal of Arts and National Humanities Medal Awards. So how did you do?
Sure. Well, I have to say that this was, the backstory is, I had performed at Stanford University a number of years back, and that was when Connie Rice, Dr. Rice, was a provost, was the provost. And so she came backstage and says, "Hi, I'm Condoleezza Rice. I'm a pianist. My favorite composer is Brahms." I said, "Wow, this is great. Provost of University, fabulous." I said to her, "The next time I meet you," thinking it would be at Stanford again, you know, "let's go play something." She said, "I'd love to," and so that was that. And so then she became, went to the NSA, then became Secretary of State. When the Medal of Arts came up, they asked, "Well, can you perform?" I said, "Well, you know, there are lots of people getting awards, not exactly a cool thing to do." So anyway, and then it was suggested that, you know, maybe we should do something. In fact, I may have suggested it because remembering the conversation. And what was interesting was my takeaway from working with her is that she is incredibly disciplined and has nerves of steel. So, I mean, she took time out. We were going to rehearse for 15 minutes. It turned out to be 2 hours. Then she canceled things, and then she went back to it, and we just went through things. And just with such diligence and such stick-to-itiveness, you know, I think that was very, very impressive.
And a technical skill?
Yeah, I mean, you know, she was cool under pressure. You know, when I'm asked to do something I don't usually do, you know, I'd be...
I have to ask you about that. Now, in terms of performances, live performances, you've done so many. You've been awarded so many times with all kinds of things. How do you balance now live performances with nurturing young talent, which I know you do a lot of?
Well, I think, well, sometimes it's a balance, but I think I work with a lot of young people and perform with them, and mostly through the Silk Road Project. I think the average age in the ensemble is probably mid-late, early 20s, early 30s. And it's just such a pleasure because I'm at the age where I'm actually learning a lot from them. So it's not a mentor-mentee relationship. It's more like we're together trying to explore something, and what do we each bring to the table? Which is actually my favorite way of learning, because we're teaching each other and learning at the same time.
I'll ask you about the Silk Road Project in a moment, but I have to also ask you about the way young people relate to classical music, in the sense that with DVDs and video games and satellite television, certainly in the West, is it much harder to attract young people into classical music?
Well, I think you're right that there are a lot of competing things like what you mentioned for the time of young people in the West. Time is measured differently, and there are other priorities. And I think one of the things about music in general is that to do music, it takes time, and it takes it's not an activity where you just run into. It's a reflective activity. You're looking inside yourself and figuring out, you know, how do I want to hear this? What am I trying to say? Who's saying it to me? You know, and so those questions can't be, it's harder to do in small segments. A lot of people who go into classical music have great early nurturers, you know, an early teacher that gets them really interested, a lot of homeschooled kids. I think also kids who somehow have a strong narrative inside. I think you know what I'm talking about. And so they bump into something called music. And it doesn't have to be classical or anything. It's, you know, something that expresses what they feel inside in the realm of sound. And then suddenly it clicks. And there are different moments when that happens.
You mentor a lot of kids worldwide. I mean, I know you say it's not just a mentoring relationship, it's a two-way street, but you know, young people from Lithuania, Korea, places like Lebanon. To what extent do you find that East and West, I mean, there's a different approach, finding that inner narrative?
Well, I think one of the things that I'll give you an example. Not that Jordan is the East, but let's say that it's a little further east than Philadelphia, if you're going.
Right.
I give classes, you know, just kind of meet musicians or school-age children pretty much everywhere. I was in Amman and I gave, you know, a class, and right, I think in 1990, and I also gave, you know, I do classes regularly in the States. The difference is that in the States, someone will play, they're very accomplished, they know what they're doing, they actually want the next step. What do I need to do to get this better, to, you know, win this competition, or you know, there's a specific goal in mind. When I was in Amman, and what was so moving to me was that the kids that I played with or listened to were maybe less technically equipped, but when I asked them, you know, what does this music mean to you? Out came the most poetic answer, reflecting, you know, they've thought about this a lot in context of the world. So it's not a category of classical music or whatever, but they're thinking about, you know, and so that moved me so deeply that that was one of the sort of launching points after having gone to Petra and going to Aqaba and whatever, that thought, you know, I'd like to really do something in these regions, and to just share experiences, because what I realized is they know a lot that I don't know, and I want to find out more.
We had an email I'd like to put to you from a viewer called Kenneth Miles in Seattle in the USA. And Kenneth says, I'm a huge fan of your work. I want to inspire a love for string instruments in my own children. Do you have any suggestions?
I think the greatest, well, I don't know how old his kids are, but I would suggest that, you know, children pick up everything and they watch their parents, they watch their peer group. You know, I think inspiring is one of the most wonderful things to be able to do, but that means you actually have to be genuinely interested in something. Say, hey, look at this, listen to this, you know, and see what catches. And that means you have to know yourself, you have to know what you love, and you have to actually know who you're talking to. Who is your child? What do they, you know, maybe they're tactile, maybe they just listen, maybe they're visual, maybe, you know, what are their learning methods? So I think just knowing that, and then you'll figure out the answer from that knowledge, which I'm sure he knows already. So I'd say show your own enthusiasm for something, and I think that's possibly the best way to go.
Now, you explore a lot of music outside Western cultures. You look at the music from other forms and other cultures, other traditions. And an email question that came in from Kathleen Rhines in Michigan says, why did you start the Silk Road Ensemble, and what do you hope to gain from it?
Well, I'll get to the conclusion first, is having worked in this way for about 8 years, I believe I'm a better musician doing whatever I do, including playing classical music. I feel so much freer as a musician, but most of all, I feel more human. Why did I start it? Well, the number of jumping points, you know, this moment when I was in Amman, I think in the 20 years out of 30, I've been playing the cello for 48 years.
And well, you started very young.
Yeah, that's right. I'm 52.
And you look very young for it.
No, you look very young. And so I've been playing professionally for about 37 years. I've spent more than 20 years total on the road. So what happens on the road? You've traveled so much, but when I go on the road and you go to some place, people show you what they care about. They take, you know, they entertain you in, not, I mean, you know, going to fancy places, but they give of themselves to you. And I think there's no way I can possibly repay people with a similar gesture, because, you know, my home would be overwhelmed with people saying, well, you know, we showed you around, now you show us around. So I'd be doing that all the time. Yeah. And so what I decided to do is to actually report back to people when I perform on my experiences. And over the years, I realized that from seeing images, getting stories, and knowing, says, you know, you go to the southern part of Japan, you hear, wow, this music sounds like Balinese music. You go to Asia and you see Zoroastrian rituals performed in Buddhist temples. How did that happen? The travel of religion, and then you see, you know, Roman glass in really in the Far East, you know, and there's so much evidence that we can see in all the various places. Petra, the architecture has so many different styles. So how did this happen? So, you know, gradually you put things together. He says, you know, this is what joined people at various times globally over the last several thousand years. And so it was a concept. I didn't trust myself, so I got a lot of people together who know much, you know, who are experts in artifacts, in images, in painting, in music, and said, you know, is this worthwhile doing something like that? And I'm thinking, well, in this world of ours, we think nations, but there are a lot of things that actually cross, that are transnational in nature, both now as well as in the past. And so we talk so much about globalization. This is not the first time we've had globalization.
It's interesting because there are also common themes in human nature. And I have to ask you about the Leila and Majnun piece, which is, I gather, a sort of Azeri version of Romeo and Juliet.
Yes, Leila Majnun is a story. Majnun means, I guess, crazy in Arabic, and Leila means sort of evening, and it's you know, two young people, they meet, they never, and in this version, they're Arabic versions, they're Persian versions. This is the one that we're doing is based on the Persian poet Nizami, and but it was composed, and it's the music that some of the music is composed, some of it is improvised. The improvised parts are in Mugam style, which means certain modes that are sort of common to probably over 1 billion people. And this story is so much part of people's lives that it's, you know, it's part of the currency of conversation. Oh, you're acting like Majnun, you know, you're being this. And we decided it's such a beautiful story. You have so many visual representations, you have musical representation, you have great poetry, and we thought, can we put it together and make sense of it to audiences in a number of places? You know, by Western classical standards, would it work by Azeri standards? Would it work in, you know, in Iran? Would it work in Lebanon? And we believe that after having worked for a couple of years on this, that we're coming close to being able to do a version that is that is both tremendously respectful of the various arts that have joined that story together, as well as in a contemporary world with Xboxes, with, so how do you do that? And that was the challenge.
An interesting email that came in from Beatrice Rowan in Indiana in the USA says, have you thought about taking the Silk Road to conflict zones? It would be very difficult. It would be difficult, but very inspirational for people there to know that someone still cares for them.
Well, I think one of the things that I believe, one of the values that we kind of practice in the organization is that we try and go to the homes of all of our ensemble members. So and in traveling conflict areas, we've been to Azerbaijan, which was in conflict with Armenia, but we have Armenian musicians on the same stage as the Azeri musicians, but maybe not in their home country. But we also, by playing the music of one country abroad, I think it actually energizes the people, the practitioners at home. So there's the value of doing it abroad, there's the value of going to the home country. We've been to Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, and we've been to Lebanon, we've been to Israel, we've been to Syria early on with the Aga Khan Architecture Prize. We've been to Malaysia just now, obviously in China, and members have gone to Iran. But basically, we're actually trying to explore the regions that we actually would like to learn about more deeply over the years. So there's a lot of work to do, but I think, yes, we absolutely care about the music. And one of the most wonderful things that's happened is we now love each other's music, and we're actively trying to advocate for each other's music. And it's based on friendship and trust.
Yo-Yo Ma, it was a real pleasure talking with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Riz.
Thank you. And that's it for this edition of the show. Thanks very much for joining us. Don't forget to send us any emails with suggestions to riz@aljazeera.net. We'll see you next time. Street Talk is next.